So on Saturday, Tottenham Hotspur face Manchester United at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. It is the early kickoff on Saturday, 12:30 p.m. Now, Tottenham Hotspur, of course, last time out in the Premier League, lost at home against Chelsea, losing the game 1-0. We only had one shot on target, and the XG 0.05, the lowest in Tottenham's Premier League history. Now, Tottenham have struggled at home in the Premier League in 2025, having played 20 matches, 4 wins, 4 draws, and 12 defeats. In fact, Spurs have lost 41 Premier League games since moving in our new home back in 2019. We do have an excellent record at home, though, in recent years in Europe. Of course, Spurs beating Copenhagen 4-0 in the Champions League on Tuesday evening. Now, 22 of our last European games, 18 wins and 4 draws. Javi Simons certainly put in a shift as well. And a lot of players took their opportunity on Saturday, which was great to see. Now, in the Premier League, if Spurs beat Manchester United this Saturday in the 12:30 kickoff, we could move up to second in the Premier League table. But I will add that Spurs are only 2 points off being 11th. So it's very, very tight in there. Spurs are currently in 6th place. Manchester United are 8th. Manchester United are unbeaten in their last 4 Premier League games, beating Sunderland 2-0, then beating Liverpool at Anfield 2-1, beating Brighton 4-2 at Old Trafford, and most recently drawing 2-2 away at Nottingham Forest. Now, of course, before the 1-0 home defeat against Chelsea, Spurs went to Everton, won 3-0. The time before that was another defeat at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, losing 2-1 against Aston Villa. Now, overall, in our history, previous meetings in all competitions played 177. Spurs have won 44, 43 draws, and 90 Manchester United victories. Now, of course, Spurs beat Manchester United in the Europa League final on the 21st of May. Brennan Johnson scoring the only goal, and Tottenham completed the Premier League double over Manchester United last season. They last won 3 consecutive league games against the Red Devils back in 1959-1960 season. Gareth, how are you feeling ahead of this Manchester United game? Are you nervous? Are you confident? How are you feeling?
Nervous because, Chris, I've had the same kind of look at the table that you've had, and we could be in a great position if we won this game, but we could be in a very, very poor position if we lose it. I mean, it'll be a nervous wit if we lose and we're watching everyone else playing, thinking, oof, team one's here and the team one's there. We can end ourselves, mid-table, as you say, and that would be worrying. Because I don't think we've had the hardest fixtures of our, compared to some of the other teams around us. I think there's more difficult games to come between now and the new year, and these first cycle of games. So that would be a massive concern. And look, going back to Saturday, we'll speak about the recent record against United, because they're United for years was an absolute nightmare for Spurs, as it was for our teams. But recently, Spurs have had a really good record, but so have a lot of teams. But we'll come back to that. We'll come on this Saturday, because I watched the Chelsea game last night, and Quarabag were opening Chelsea up for fun. And we spoke about the Chelsea game last weekend when we did the predictions for match week 10. And I says to you, there's a vulnerability about Chelsea. If you put pressure on them, they make mistakes. I mean, the centre halves for Chelsea last night were making mistakes all over the place because Quarabag were pressing them. And Quarabag are, a team on the up, but they're from Azerbaijan. I think last night was the first time they ever took points off English opposition. So, that shows you the massive difference between Azerbaijan and the English teams. And Quarabag, they give Chelsea absolutely nightmares last night and should have won the game. They'd only a massive opportunity that the keeper saved. So we looked terrified against Chelsea on Saturday. Absolutely terrified. We never pressed them once. We never put them under any pressure. It was so comfortable for Chelsea. Jamie Carragher done a great piece on Monday Night Football of, there wasn't any great thing that Chelsea were doing to stop Spurs playing. He pointed out numerous things when Vicario had the ball of how players could have helped the goalkeeper, helped the defenders by showing for the ball. But there was a real lack of desire to get on the ball, a real lack of desire to play forward, play any kind of risky passes. And Chelsea, in the end, by the time the second half had finished, they probably had their best spell towards the end of the game because they couldn't believe how comfortable Spurs were. And Spurs looked beaten a long way from the final whistle going, and they were only 1-0 down. So that was a big worry mentally, and just how limited we looked. I mean, there's I think Jamie Carragher pointed out about the lack of progressive play. But you look at Bentancur on Tuesday night against Copenhagen, it was like watching a completely different player. And I can kind of understand with Polina, and I think Jamie Carragher made good points why maybe it didn't work at Bayern Munich and maybe some of the top teams didn't sign him, because he's a brilliant defensive midfielder, but in terms of on the ball, that's not his skills, and that's fine if he play to his strengths. But Bentancur, for me, as a player that likes to get forward, presses high, wins the ball back, and does like they play progressive passes in the final third. And under Thomas Frank, we haven't seen enough of that. It was like watching the old Bentancur on Tuesday night against Copenhagen. We haven't seen that from him all season long. So from what I took out of Saturday, Chris, was yes, players at times were poor on the ball, but I do think the tactical approach was to sit off and let Chelsea have the ball and maybe try and score from a counter attack or set piece, and that's just not good enough for Tottenham Hotspur. It's not acceptable. We've seen too many performances, especially at home, where we're respecting the opposition, and it's almost as if there's a directive that we're not good enough to play forward, or we're not good enough to get on the ball and try and make things happen. Because yes, Copenhagen are not the they're not the barometer of success. They're not going to be a team that qualifies for the next round of the Champions League. But this is a team that beat Man United a couple of years ago, so they're not completely hopeless. They're not a team that are incapable of picking up points. They're just not a team that's probably going to get much further in this competition. And let's be honest, Chris, Spurs could have had double digits against them. It was as we recognise that Copenhagen aren't a strong European side. Spurs could have beat them so badly that it could have been a record scoreline defeat for them. Because you think about the opportunities we missed, the amount of chances we created, and overall, Chris, it was an absolute pleasure to watch. And I just can't understand that we haven't seen more of that under Thomas Frank. And maybe Chelsea is a big turning point, but I think the evidence will come on Saturday against United. And we can't go back to how it was in previous weeks.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel like this past week, there are a lot of positives to talk about, especially against Copenhagen, as you've mentioned, a lot of creativity. All of us fans, especially the ones that went to the stadium, everyone before the game that I spoke to, they were saying, where's the creativity coming from? Where's the goals coming from? But of course, they certainly came, and every player put a shift in. But a lot of people aren't getting carried away, particularly having watched that Chelsea game and creating so little, only having one shot on target. Gareth, do you worry about the creativity in Premier League games? Because like you've just mentioned there, it was FC Copenhagen, no disrespect to them, but it was very, very different to a Premier League game. And I'll give you an example. The amount of time that Xavi Simons had on the ball, excellent performance, man of the match performance. Of course, he didn't want to come off the pitch, looked disappointed when he came off, and rightly so, because he's probably feeling like, look, I've had a tough start to my career at Tottenham. I'm playing well. I'm getting time on the ball. I'm creating chances. He desperately wants to score as well. And he probably would have felt very disappointed, and understandably so, because he wants to have that very special game. He played an hour, got man of the match, but we need to see it in the Premier League as well. And as I mentioned, only one shot on target against Chelsea on Saturday. And it's really interesting, and I want to get your opinion on this. When George Sessions from Press Association, in the press conference after the game, after Chelsea game, he said to Thomas Frank, I just don't understand the fact that, Spurs are 1-0 down at half time, haven't come out fighting, and the team haven't had a shot on target in that second half. Is it a lack of creativity? Is it a lack of confidence? What is it? Is it tactical? Where do you see the problem lying? Because as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of positives to take out of Tuesday's game against Copenhagen. Cowlin Mawani, yes, he had a couple of chances. He put one wide and put one over the bar. Two great chances, actually. You would have expected a striker to bury both of them. He did set up Odegaard for his goal as well. So there was positive signs with him. There's positive signs with some players, but creativity in the Premier League, this is going to be a very, very different game against Manchester United.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to your point about the creativity and speak about Xavi Simons, because Chris, we've spoken about Xavi Simons quite a lot, whether it be on the podcast or whether it be on this production show. And I did say, as poor as he's been at times, I think the way the team is set up and the way the team is playing does not suit Xavi Simons or a player like Xavi Simons. Xavi Simons is a creative player. It has to be allowed to try things and make mistakes, because that's what creative players do. For as many brilliant things as they'll do, I mean, you think about one of the best ever creative midfielders in the Premier League was Kevin De Bruyne. But he would pull off these unbelievable passes, and you would see videos clipped up. But I'm sure if you watch Man City every single week, there was probably loads of those that didn't come off. He didn't just start doing that. He doesn't do it once a game and it comes off every single time. So the way the team's designed, and they're so deep at times, and maybe Dad spoke about this, it was so refreshing to see Miani actually have support around him, because when he's been playing in previous games, he's been up there on his own, fighting with two centre halves and no one near him because the team's so far back defensively. And I think that's been had a massive impact on Xavi Simons, because he's come onto a team that's been asked, and Thomas Frank hasn't admitted this, but it's the evidence doesn't lie. He's coming onto a team that's a pragmatic team, and creative players struggle in pragmatic setups. You think about teams like, I watched Bournemouth go to Man City on Sunday. And yes, Erling Haaland was at his best and defeated them. But Bournemouth opened Man City up as many times as they let Man City in. Man City just have better players and punished them. But there was a bravery from Bournemouth to go to Man City and go, we're going to play our way. We're not going to sit back and respect you. And Bournemouth were well in the game up until the end of it, where Man City ran out 3-1 winners. And I think that's the biggest difference with Spurs at the minute. Spurs are looking at the opposition and worrying about the opposition instead of thinking, Chris, how many managers in the Premier League would kill for a Kudus, Miani, and a Xavi Simons front three? We're talking about a French international up front who scored 16 goals for Juventus between January and the end of the season last year. Kudus, who we know has been the best dribbler going forward in Europe and tick-ons, and Xavi Simons, a renowned superstar from the Bundesliga and a Dutch international who scored against England in the semi-final of the Euros. So, we're talking about good players here, but they've been so isolated at times, and the manager's just not suited to their strengths playing this way. So I think, and I hope that Tuesday night was a turning point, because we've seen, yes, albeit against Copenhagen, but we've seen Xavi Simons having an impact. And the cross in for Miani was the first real bit of world-class potential we've seen, where he arcs his body, goes under space and bends the ball around, and he puts it on an absolute plate for Miani, who should score. But look, Miani needed that the other night. Too many games he's been on. He's been starved of service. How's he ever going to score a goal if he's getting no service? And look, I know we've been critical of Richarlison, and he was poor when he came on again the other night. But, you put any striker into that team, and include Erling Haaland, if he's not getting service, he's got absolutely no chance of scoring goals. And that has been the biggest issue. And we've seen even in recent weeks, Chris, with Kudus has went off the boil because he's getting so little of the ball. He needs the ball to feet. He needs the ball in behind. He needs to be able to take players on, and he needs support around him. They take players away from him. Teams are doubling up on Kudus. Pellegrini and Bentancur's miles back, so they can double up and put two on him. And the only way Kudus can go is either down the line and try and beat him, whip across him, or knock it straight back to his right back, Pedro Porro. And even we see Pedro Porro on Tuesday night, he was overlapping. He wasn't doing that against Chelsea. He was sitting in a position for a pass backwards. And the intentions have got to be better if we're going to climb up this table, because if you're relying on set pieces and counter-attacks, you're not going to go far, and you're not going to progress as a football club. Don't get me wrong, Chris. There is games for it. Arsenal away, PSG away. No Tottenham fans going to, criticise for being pragmatic, because we know they're better teams than us right now. But at home against Chelsea, Man United, Bournemouth, Burnley, Aston Villa, we do expect our team to be on the front foot, and that hasn't been the case.
Gareth, how would you describe Thomas Frank's tactics and the way that he sets the team up? Because when he was asked in a press conference recently about being a defensive coach and being a pragmatic coach, and you used that word a couple of minutes ago, pragmatic, and then he said about, who's saying that? Is it journalists? Is it fans online? Is it social media? He didn't like that question, and he said a couple of occasions that his teams have scored a lot of goals, and he's confident that this team will score a lot of goals in the future.
No manager will ever admit to being pragmatic. Even Jose Mourinho, he was the master of being pragmatic for 20 years. Never admitted to being pragmatic. Remember that famous conversation where he pulled out the press conference where he pulled out the list of all the strikers that scored goals under him: Drogba, Benzema, Ibrahimovic. He didn't like the question, but Yes, we
But
have
but
great.
also let me ask you, because I was having this debate with someone the other day, and they were saying, Chris, look, you knew Spurs fans knew what you were going to get with Thomas Frank, with the types of football that he played at Brentford.
Yeah.
And I actually come out and said, well, I thought that Brentford a lot of the time were a very entertaining team. Would you agree and go along with that?
I think because they were together for so long, they were probably so well drilled. Where we know, and I'm a coach myself, it does take time, but you have to show the fans that there's something to get behind for support. I mean, I think back to the early days of Pochettino. Yes, there was problems, but you could see in certain games that what the team was trying to do. I think it was Jamie Redknapp says it's the worst performance he can remember from a Spurs team at home. He says, I have no idea what they were trying to do. Jamie Carragher was analysing it. He says, the worry for me, and he says, I like Thomas Frank, Jamie Carragher says, but he says, the worry for me, we've seen this with Nuno, and we've seen this with our managers at our clubs, where it's a massive transition from being at a mid-table or team fighting relegation, and then to try and transfer that to a top club who are expected to win every week, or at least most weeks, especially at home. It's a different kind of pressure. And, if Brentford lose a couple of games at home, it's not a disaster. If Spurs do, it's a big, big problem. And the fans at Spurs are not, we're not patient, because we do expect, we pay a lot of money. I mean, Chris, the other night on the TNT, this is, it's 60 quid a game here to watch them play Copenhagen at home. If you're going to charge that, we expect the best. And the home performances have been so bad in the Premier League that it's, the fans have every right to be fuming. And Chris, it's not just about losing games. As you say, one shot on target against an average Chelsea team who just got beaten by Sunderland, just drew a quarterback, and they just rolled us over as if we were a Sunday League team. Jamie Carragher said it himself. Spurs
they have changed the price. Yeah, they have changed the price for the Dortmund game, and I'm glad about that, because I tell you what, I said this the other night. When Spurs are playing, or when any team in England are playing the Champions League, especially, you mentioned Pochettino there. When Poch was our manager, there was not a spare ticket in town for that game, for any home game in the Champions League. The place was sold out, particularly at our new stadium. So we've got to see more fans on the seats for these Champions League games, because I hated seeing so many empty seats for a Champions League game. It felt like and I said this the other night as well, it felt like a League Cup game in the early stages when you've got that amount of seats empty.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think there was 44,000 roughly at the game, which is criminal. But what I would say is there was still more positive energy. There was still a louder atmosphere. As opposed to Chelsea. We want the stadium full, of course we do, and I think it's great that the club have rectified the Dortmund game, but it just shows you that if you give the team something to get behind, you will get that support on the pitch. I mean, Chris, I was at the 4-1 defeat to Chelsea, Ange's first defeat, and the players were clapped off the pitch after getting beat 4-1, because the effort was there, the intensity was there, the desire to play forward. And Chris, the one thing I want to see, and every fan wants their team to do, and that's why I'll be so delighted if I was a Bournemouth fan right now, they play with absolutely no fear.
You've got to go for it.
They can beat anyone, and Spurs played with fear against Chelsea, and that is just not acceptable.
Yeah. That's what any Spurs fan, wants to see, that you've got to go for it. You've definitely got to go for it, and that's why it was so disappointing not to have a shot in that second half. Now, Manchester United are winless in their last 7 meetings with Tottenham in all competitions. As you mentioned this earlier, Gareth, about their record recently against Spurs, drawing 2 and losing 5, losing each of their last 4. The team to win 5 in a row against the Red Devils were Liverpool between 2000 and 2002. I've got some very quick questions for you, if you can give me some very quick answers. Carragher said it was like watching a League Two team play against a Premier League team, talking about the Spurs v Chelsea performance. Was that harsh?
No, it was completely right. I mean, in League Two's being generous, it looked like a Sunday League team that just got it under the FA Cup third round, and we're going to play Liverpool at Anfield, and literally had no... couldn't believe they were there. It was that the level between the two teams was scary. And the scary thing was, Chris, that Chelsea weren't even that good. We made them look good.
Do you know what also frustrated me is I don't think Sanchez is a particularly good goalkeeper for Chelsea, and the fact that we didn't test him in the goal, especially in that second half, that's what I can't get my head around. It is frustrating, and when you saw Thomas Frank's face as well when he was told in the press conference that the XG was 0.05, and he came out and said, "I've never managed a team creating so little." That you could tell he felt that.
Well, Chris, I hope that and the Jamie Carragher comments hurt him, because it has to hurt him. If he does not want to hear that about the team that he's managing. But Chris, I'll go back to, do you remember the game at Wembley against Barcelona? We got beat 4-2. The year we got to the Champions League final. We lost the game 4-2, right? Barcelona were unbelievable that night. Messi was incredible.
Yeah.
And there was a realization that, yes, we didn't play that well, but we were completely outplayed by an unbelievable Barcelona team that probably should have won the Champions League. They had a nightmare at Anfield, and we probably should have played them in the final that year.
Yeah.
I mean, Liverpool produced a miracle comeback, but that night, you just had to clap Barcelona off the pitch. They were incredible, but there was still a desire and a fight that Spurs made it even a bit of a game and losing the game 4-2. It wasn't like that on Saturday. It wasn't like Chelsea were just miles too good for us. We just gave them far too much respect and let them have a comfortable victory. That's the difference. And if Spurs fans see fight, desire, and intensity, willing to play forward and get beat, I think fans will still say, you know what, at least we had a go.
Gareth, I want to ask you a little bit about Mohamed Kudus, because in my opinion, he was completely taken out of the game, and he has been, our best player this season so far. But he was taken out of the game by Cucurella on Saturday against Chelsea. Is that a worry? The fact that, I suppose it's fair to say our sole consistent performer in the final third was taken out of the game. Will other teams target him to do exactly the same in the future?
Well, I think we've spoken about this, haven't we, Chris? I think that Kudus is starting to suffer the way Xavi Simons is suffering now. Kudus has the experience of the Premier League, but I think teams have caught on to how creative Kudus is and how much we rely on him. That there's very, very good managers in the Premier League, Chris, and a lot of these managers now have brilliant analysts watching every move of every game. And we're now in their 11th match week. Teams have a fair idea now how our teams are going to play. And that's why you see, Chris, the likes of Sunderland now coming up. Over the next few weeks, teams are going to start to suss out how Sunderland play. So it will become more difficult for Sunderland to win games because they've got so many new players. They're new to the league. But like with Spurs, with Ange, teams caught on how Ange went about it after 10, 11 games. We were catching teams cold those first few weeks. But as the season goes on, it becomes more challenging. And you've seen him for the last few weeks. Kudus' form's deteriorated. Maybe he can do better, but for me, it's more of a setup problem than it is an individual issue. Because look, we know we need better attackers. We know we need to go into the market in January, but I don't think Miami's been anywhere near the player he was for Juventus when he came on there on loan. Odegaard, I do think there is something there. I think the manager has to get more out of him. Richarlison, maybe you could excuse because he's been poor under every manager really, and he's had injury problems. Tell hasn't been good enough, but there was a player at Bayern Munich, everyone tells me. So it's up to the manager to get the best out of these players. We know we need more if we're going to challenge for the major honours. I still think there's enough there for a team to be minimum making games entertaining. I think there's other clubs in the lower end of the league would kill for some of the players that we have. So they can't be as bad as what they're looking. They do need support. And, I think even bringing Pape Sarr on Tuesday night, it just gave a different look to the team. And we just looked a lot more adventurous, a lot more attacking. And we looked as well, Chris, and if you were speaking about, a lot of reliance on Kudus. If you're setting up with Polina, Bentancur, a back four and a goalkeeper on behind them, you're limiting the threats you have on the pitch. You're limiting on what you can put into the final third. With Pape Sarr in there, instead of a Polina, you've got more of a, with Pape Sarr's a goal scorer, you've got more threat on that pitch, and you give teams more to worry about. So the manager's got to find a way to get his best players into the team. Basically, we know we need to win matches, Chris, but the first thing he's got to do if he wants to be successful at Spurs is he's got to win the home fans over. And the only way to win home fans over is winning games of football, or at least if you can't win every week, be at least entertaining. I mean, Chris, I don't know what the fans talked about in the pub after the Chelsea game. One Kudus shot. What is this? Like, I mean, it's not Sunday League. It's Premier League football. I mean,
it's hard.
I've been at games. We've lost we've lost matches, but I go, oh, do you know what? If that move was good, and if that goal had been done, might have been a different game. There was certain things in there about the game that I seen and I liked. There was nothing they like about Saturday, and if that continues, the manager's got a massive problem.
Well, talking of the manager, across spells with Brentford and Spurs, Thomas Frank has suffered 9 defeats in his last 16 home Premier League matches, winning 3 and drawing 4. Before this run, his Brentford side had won 7 of their previous 8 home games, drawing 1. Now, we're over 20 minutes talking about Spurs so far, and we haven't mentioned Micky van der Ven's goal. What was better, Son's or Van der Ven's? Both incredible strikes.
I think we could do a whole podcast on Van der Ven because what a player he is.
Incredible.
For me, Van der Ven all day long. I think that was the better goal. One, because he's a centre half. I've actually watched it again a fair few times today. And the balance, the speed, the aggression, the left foot, the right foot. It's one of the best goals I've ever seen. I'm not just saying that because I'm a Spurs fan, but lay me another player around the world that could do that right now. I don't know, in that way. Yes, we know there's loads of players out there that can dribble and weave in between. I don't know if anyone can just burst past people, boy them left foot, right foot, and just bang it under the corner as if it was. He made it look easy. He made it look so easy, and it's just mind blowing how. And it's Chris. It's not as if it was a one off. He's produced runs like that before where he set players up.
Yeah.
You think about Son's goal against Everton. You think about Johnson's goal against Man United.
Yeah.
And it just, Chris, we had a joke a few weeks ago about players that get you off your feet. And, we laughed when we said about a centre half. But, he is a bit of a freak. There's no other centre half around that I've ever seen that could do something like that. It was just breathtaking. And, it couldn't have came at a better time. I know we won the game, but the Spurs fans have struggled at home this year to see anything of like top quality or of like magical moments, and that was a magical moment. We spoke about what the fans have been talking about after the game in the pubs after the Chelsea game. They probably couldn't have stopped talking about Van der Ven's goal in the pubs after the Copenhagen game, or they probably couldn't have said, you know what, we won 4-0, but we could have won 10. It was exciting. I watched the game at home on Tuesday night, and I could hardly sleep because it was like, you're pumped up after that. That's what we want to see every week. And
it was so important though, Gareth, wasn't it? It was so important that all of us fans saw that and saw what some of these players are capable of. And someone said to me before the game, my friend Grant said, what do you want to see out today's game? And I said, I want to see Xavi Simons have a really good performance, and just for his own sake. And so the Spurs fans, because you've noticed over the past couple of weeks, a lot of criticism has been towards Xavi Simons, particularly with the price tag, and particularly when people thought we were going to get Morgan Gibbs-White and then Eze and then Xavi Simons, and a lot of people said, well, actually, we got the better deal. And then a lot of people criticised him, particularly after that Chelsea game. So it's very, very important for him. Let me just read you this stat. Spurs are averaging just 9.7 shots per game this season, 97 shots in 10 matches. It's our lowest average in a Premier League campaign on record since 1997-1998.
Again, that's more evidence to Thomas Frank that you are setting up a pragmatic approach. Every stat you find backs up the fan opinion that this is a pragmatic football team at the moment. He's got to change that. That was a breath of fresh air. And I know things can happen in games, and I don't think the fourth goal happens without Van der Ven's goal. I think that kind of goal, it just gives everybody a lift, the fans. And Romero's like, do you know what? I want some of this. I'm going to get forward. And I think everything just went rogue. And at that point, Spurs could have scored 3 or 4 goals in the space of 5 or 6 minutes because Copenhagen were rattled. Chris, when was the last time you seen a team where they looked so rattled? The manager was tearing pages up and trying to get subs on, and he didn't know what to do because Spurs were just in full throttle, and that is what we want to see every week. And it kind of reminded you back to the Pochettino days where we'd score 1, then we'd score a second, then we'd score a third, then we'd score a fourth, and the game was over. Team was beaten. And it got to the point where teams were beaten in the tunnel before they walked out at the old White Hart Lane. That is what Thomas Frank needs to bring back here. As he the manager to do it, it's probably against his beliefs. But if that is an evidence on Tuesday night to get this place rocking on Saturday at lunchtime, I don't know what is. I really don't know what is. And that's why I think it's a massive game for the manager, because I'm going to the game on Saturday. If I see a 11:15 on Saturday, a negative team selection, that's going to completely kill my feeling about the game. Let's get the fans up for the game. Let's put an attacking team out. And let's be honest, Man United are a vulnerable team. Yes, they've had a good run, but they were, against Nottingham Forest, some of the chances they were giving away, they're a shambles at the back still. They are there to be got at. Let's go about it a different way.
Gareth, before I ask you about Manchester United's season and get your predicted lineup and score prediction, you've mentioned in this short chat so far, you've mentioned Pochettino a couple of times. Now, in the last 24 hours, an interview has come out that Pochettino has come out and said that he wants to come back to England. He wants to come back to the Premier League one day. He spoke about Tottenham, saying, what enjoyment he had at Spurs and how we nearly won the league and how we nearly won the Champions League. And he also spoke out about Daniel Levy and thanked him for the opportunity he got at Tottenham. Would you like to see Pochettino back at Tottenham one day? And do you think it's a realistic option for Tottenham? It might be a couple of years down the line. It might be 5 years down the line. But can you see it happening?
I read the article today, and it's not the first time he spoke about Tottenham and returning to Tottenham or returning to the Premier League. I don't think he's particularly enjoying it at international level. I think he feels he's got a lot to give at club level. I've no doubt that he's been given a brilliant financial package to lead America and the World Cup, and I'm sure he's a very professional man. He'll be focused on that, but he does like to flirt with the media about a return to Spurs. And let's be honest, who wouldn't like to see it? We'd be lying if we says we don't want him back at some stage. Look, I think if things, I don't see him at the national American team beyond the summer. I think that's just for the World Cup. So he probably will be available after the World Cup. And if things don't go well this season, I think you would probably say that Pochettino will be the favourite to be the next Tottenham manager. So it may not be as far away as some people think. But look, as a Tottenham fan, Chris, we do have loyalty to your current manager, and the idea of Pochettino coming back means that this manager is going to fail, and it means we're going to be miserable as Tottenham fans. So look, as much as we've been critical, we are all behind Thomas Frank. Nobody wants to see Thomas Frank fail at Spurs, but he does have to learn and learn fast, because this is a big club with big expectations, and a lot of managers would love to manage at Tottenham, and there's a manager who's managed this before, knows what it's like for the fans. He understands what the fans want. He got that. I don't think I've ever been as connected with a Tottenham manager as I have with Pochettino. And Chris, the one thing I'd like to say is you think about Pochettino and you think about Ange to a certain extent. The one thing that worries me with Thomas Frank is 15, 20 minutes before a game, getting ready to walk out to the pitch. Does Thomas Frank inspire you in the dressing room to go out and, get on the front foot, run through brick walls? I don't know if he's got the personality to manage a top club. He's a nice man. He's a good organised coach. But I don't know if he's got the personality to succeed at a top club. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope it is successful here, because we all want to see Spurs be successful. But it does worry me, because the way the team starts games, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall, because Chris, I'm obviously very pumped up because I'm thinking about Saturday and I'm thinking about going to the game. I would love to do the team talk on Saturday for the players. They understand for them what it means to play for this club and what it would mean to get a home win against Man United. Does Thomas Frank have that same energy as we do, as a Pochettino would, or as an Ange did to a certain extent? Ange, for all his flaws, he was a very good speaker, and the players really, really liked him. Even seen it towards the end. There was a massive public backing after the Europa League final from the players, and you only seen the outpouring of emotions after the manager was sacked. Yes, there was flaws with Ange, and yes, the players didn't agree with everything he did, but they liked him as a person. You've seen some of the signs already with Xavi Simons and Van de Ven and Spence. Has Frank got everyone on board yet? I still think he has to convince some of the players and a lot of the fans.
Right, Gareth, let's quickly talk about Manchester United, because Manchester United's Bruno Fernandes has 53 Premier League assists since his debut back in Feb 2020. Only Salah, 64, and De Bruyne, 58, have more. What have you made of Manchester United this season? I know we've spoken about them a lot over the course of the last few weeks, certainly. As I mentioned earlier, last 4 games, 3 wins, 1 draw. This is a good period for them. What sort of game are you expecting on Saturday? And I suppose that would lead you into talking about the starting 11 that you'd like to see Spurs put out.
Look, Man United have come on for heavy criticism from the media, from ex-players, and former Man United managers. I mean, they, from every angle, Amram's had it up against them. But I do have to say, you have to give him credit for his persistence that he's going to do it his way or no way. And look, there was something admirable about Ange, as much as it was crazy at times. Amram's cut from the same cloth a bit. We're going to play my system, or I will, you get rid of me. I'm not changing for anyone. And I think there is similarities between Ange and Amram in terms of, I think a lot of the players like him. They may not agree with everything he does, and they may not agree with certain parts of the system, but I do believe they are playing for him. And even like United have had some terrible records. Amram's he's broken some terrible records as a manager, but you see the way the players interact with him and engage with him. And I do think they do like him. And it's a similar one where, if it doesn't happen this year, it may be that he's moved on, but I don't think it's because the players have down tools. Like under previous managers, Ten Hag, Solskjaer, Louis van Gaal, the German fella, Ralf Rangnick, they completely down tools under those managers. I haven't seen that with Man United. And I do think the players he's improving some of the players that are there. I think Ahmad's been brilliant, and and he's signed some really good players, and Bumo and Cunha have made them a lot more of a threat than they were last season. Bruno Fernandes seems to really like him a lot, and if he's your best player, and he's got a big say in that dressing room. If he's on board, most of the players will. So United are definitely benefiting as well, Chris, from only the 1 game a week, because you can see the improvements that Amram was making, especially going forward in the games at the weekend. So it's going to be a tough game, but the one thing I would say is Ruben Amram is a very brave manager. United are not going to come to Spurs and play defensive football. They're going to go for it. You see with Man United games this year, they're quite high-scoring games, 4-2 against Brighton, 2-2 against Nottingham Forest, and they were still trying to get a winner, and Forest could have won it later on. Liverpool at Anfield, even at 1-1, we're not happy with a point. We're going to try and win the game, and they did.
That was a huge result, though, Gareth. That wasn't it? Because what was it? A couple of months ago, at the start of the season, their results weren't good, and I think even both of us were predicting that he would have been one of the next Premier League managers to be sacked. And this is quite a turnaround. The result when you go to a rival like that, for Manchester United to go to Liverpool and win that game was absolutely huge for them.
Yeah, it was. But they didn't sit back at Liverpool. Even when they went to Man City, they had chances and lost the game 3-0, but they created opportunities and didn't put them away, and they were caught on the counter-attack. So they didn't sit back at Man City. They didn't sit back against Liverpool away. They're not going to come to Spurs and sit back. They're going to smell blood and go to the Spurs team. They're not too sure of themselves. The home records in the league's been awful. And United will be itching to set their record straight after the Europa League final, because all those players were there, weren't they? So they'll be looking for a bit of revenge. So it's going to be a difficult game, Chris. The one thing I would say is we cannot afford to respect Man United, because they have got dangerous players. And Bumo has done us before. Cunha has done us before at previous clubs. Sesko seems to be warming up. Bruno Fernandes is an absolute weapon. So you look at their front four, Chris, they probably have better players than us as well. So the one area they're weak is at the back. He changes his back three quite a lot. Casemiro in midfield hasn't really got legs. I think if we're going to win this game, Chris, we're going to have to score goals, because United will score. I don't see a situation. They've got too many attacking players, and the way they play football, they're going to create opportunities. So I do think it could be quite an entertaining game, as long as Spurs take part in it and don't sit back and play stiff and play for set pieces. Got to go at them, because I think if you sit back against Manchester United, Chris, you're asking for trouble. You're asking for trouble, and will be punished, because they've got too many good players not to score goals. So I would just like to see a brave Spurs team selection. You asked me about me starting 11. I would go with the exact same team that played on Tuesday. But if Kudos is fit, I would bring him on for Johnson. If Kudos isn't fit, I would stick with Brennan Johnson. That would be my team.
So you would definitely have Mawani now in the starting 11 rather than Richarlison?
Yeah, definitely. And look, my worry is I think Thomas Frank will bring Polina back in. I really do, and I think that could really, really infuriate the fan base, especially if we lose the game. I actually think, Chris, and I know it's early in his tenure, but I think if he brings Polina back in and plays with Bentancur, and he maybe moves Xavi Simons out to the left, they accommodate getting him onto a team, I think that could really lose some of the fans. And if we were to get beat, I think it would be toxic at full time, and that is my worry.
It's really interesting how you say about Spurs starting games, because do you remember? I think it was last year or the season before where Brentford just scored like 3 or 4
5 in a row
in the first minute. Was it 5 in a row in the end? Five in a row, first minute.
Yeah,
incredible. Yeah. Score prediction.
2-1 Spurs.
Yeah, I'm going to go 2-1 Spurs as well. In fact, I think this game has got a draw written all over it, but I'm just hoping for a piece of magic, something like another Van de Ven run.
Chris, I'll ask you, because you go every week. If you see 11:15, Polina and Bentancur, what would your thoughts be going into the game?
I can't see that changing, actually, Gareth. He loves that combination. He thinks that it really works in the system, the way that he wants to play. I can't see that changing. I think you're going to see that duo a lot this campaign, despite us talking about rotation and playing in all these competitions.
It's not working at home, but Chris, it's not working at home, that combination.
That home form definitely needs to change. I think a lot of things need to change, but the one thing that really worries me, that do you know what, Gareth? That is the least of my worries, that partnership in the midfield. My worry is the final third and the lack of creativity, particularly in that Chelsea game. That cannot happen again. And I would hope that Spurs come out very early on and take some long range shots. We don't seem to see a lot of long range shots, certainly this season at home. And test the goalkeeper, put the ball out to Kudus. Try different things, be more entertaining. It's got to happen because, like you've said, the Tottenham Stadium sometimes can seem, the amount of booing. And I spoke about this in the last couple of days as well on the channel, that the amount of booing, I think Frank has been in charge of Spurs for 5 Premier League home games. We've heard boos in 3 of them. Yeah, and that's not a good start for a manager.
No, it's not. And the worry for me is what you're saying there, right? Is I don't know if you can be an entertaining team with Polina and Bentancur in a midfield. I just don't see that as being possible. I think you need to have 2 progressive midfielders on there.
But what I'm saying to you, Gareth, is I don't think that that's going to change. I think that Thomas Frank is very adamant that is exactly what he wants to do, regardless of what people like you think.
Exactly, and that is why I think there's going to be a lack of entertaining football at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I think away from home, it's a bit more understandable, but at home, I just think setting up with those 2 as a double pivot, I think it's going to be very difficult for Xavi Simons to get service, Kudos to get service, and the only excuse, I know there's been a few players injured, like Kulusevski, like Madison, but my worry is if you persist them with those 2 players, there's only really room for one of those to come in. Simons, Kulusevski, or Madison, it's got to be, because he's not going to drop Kudos and play Kulusevski on the right. So the only thing they could do is rotate those 3 out. So I don't know how much that would change, but my worry is, Chris, that if he persists with those 2, I just think the attacking players are going to really struggle to get any kind of, anything linked together. But the one excuse that he's got is that Udogie's been injured. I do think there's a more balance when Udogie's playing at left back. And I
totally agree. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Usually help the left-sided player. And there's been a bit of link up between Udogie and Odegaard. So that is the only out he's got maybe at the moment that I can see, that maybe how you can make it a little bit more entertaining with that double pivot. But the evidence will be on Saturday because Udogie's fit to play. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, we've both gone for a 2-1 win. Let us know how you're feeling ahead of this game and put your score predictions in the comments section below.